and welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. The White House says U.S. President Donald Trump plans to meet his trade team this week to set tariff rates for each country. This comes as the July 9 tariff suspension deadline set by the U.S. leader looms. U.S. stocks rallied, with both the S&P 500 and the tech-heavy Nasdaq closing at new all-time highs, amid hopes for trade deals and possible rate cuts. A severe heat wave has hit South Korea, with some parts of the country experiencing the hottest June in decades. And Seoul saw the season's first heat wave advisory being issued this week. With the United States set to end its tariff pause next Wednesday, President Donald Trump is expected to hold meetings with his trade team this week to discuss pending deals and set country-specific rates. Our Kim Jongun tells us more.
With the July 9th tariff pause deadline approaching, U.S. President Donald Trump is reportedly planning meetings with his trade team this week to set tariff rates for individual countries. This, according to White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt during a briefing on Monday.
He is going to set the rates for many of these countries if they don't come to the table to negotiate in good faith, and he is meeting with his trade team this week to do that.
This echoes Director of the National Economic Council, Kevin Hassett, who said in an interview that there will be a marathon meeting as soon as the One Big Beautiful Bill Act passes before Independence Day on the 4th of July. While saying Trump will review tariff plans one country at a time, he added that the number of deals in hand is in the double digits, with a framework for negotiations in place similar to what was used to strike a deal with the UK last month. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent also warned countries to cooperate during an interview with Bloomberg TV. Though there are countries that are negotiating in good faith with the U.S., he said, they should be aware that the tariffs could spring back to April 2nd levels if the deal does not get across the line. Warnings have also been directed at specific countries. Trump, in a post of Truth Social, said Washington would be sending Tokyo a letter while threatening to impose higher tariffs on Japanese exports to the U.S. over Japan's unwillingness to buy American-grown rice, despite a massive rice shortage. Specific details of what the letter might contain have not been disclosed. Kim Jongun, Arirang News.
Both the S&P 500 and the tech-heavy Nasdaq closed at new all-time highs on Monday, as hopes for trade deals and possible rate cuts eased investor uncertainty. The Nasdaq rose over 96 points to close at 20,369.73, while the S&P 500 rose over 31 points to close above 6,204 on the day. Both indexes ended the quarter with double-digit gains, with the S&P 500 gaining over 10%, while the Nasdaq rose nearly 18%. Canada's recent withdrawal of its so-called digital tax on U.S. tech companies raised optimism about a possible trade deal between the U.S. and Canada. Both indexes had also reached all-time highs at the close of the previous session on Friday. Seoul says North Korea's recent communication with the United Nations Command is a meaningful sign as it marks the first direct contact in 8 months. According to South Korean military, North Korea last week notified the UNC of its plans to resume construction work near the demilitarized zone using the interKorean military hotline, known as the Pink Phone. Seoul's Joint Chiefs of Staff says over 1,000 North Korean troops have been mobilized daily since late last week, while adding that it will respond firmly to any violations of the military demarcation line. Although it's unclear what Pyongyang's intentions are, Seoul says the communication itself is significant, as the North has previously rejected dialogue. So with South Korea seeing the North's latest move as a meaningful sign, eyes are now on how the new administration will shape its policy on North Korea. For more on this, we're joined by Professor Kim Jongun, professor at Korea National Diplomatic Academy. Professor Min, thanks for joining us this morning.
Good morning.
Morning. So North Korea appears to have resumed operations to build fortifications near the border after notifying the United Nations Command. What might be behind the North's move?
Well, as you mentioned, North Korea recently informed the UNC that it has plans to build the fortifications inside of the border. Specifically, it was reported by the media that North Korea would resume construction of barriers and wire fences on each side of the DMZ. And it is known that it was the first notification of its kind in over 6 months. And as you know, after Chairman Kim Jongun described the inter-Korean relations as two states hostile to each other in late 2023, and beginning from April last year, 2024, North Korea deployed troops to the DMZ to plant mines, erect anti-tank barriers, and reinforce roads. And last October, North Korea informed the UNC that it would cut off all roads and railways connected to South Korea and build defense structures. So I think that North Korea's notification to the UNC this time could be a positive sign to show that Pyongyang is willing to engage in communication with the South and the UNC after the inauguration of the new president Lee Myung in Seoul last month. In general, it is perceived that North Korea's delivering prior notifications is useful to mitigate the risk of misinterpretation and miscalculation. So North Korea's notification this time can be seen as a meaningful message in relation to easing inter-Korean tensions. And I think the situation will get better in the coming months on the Korean Peninsula.
I see. And after President Lee took office, both Koreas halted using loudspeakers across the border. Could this be another sign of improving inter-Korean relations?
Yes, I think so. Regarding the inter-Korean relations, the Lee Jae-myung government want to foster a framework of peaceful coexistence on the Korean Peninsula by easing tensions between the two Koreas and pursuing North Korea's denuclearization. As you know, the inter-Korean relations got worse under the previous government due to its deterrence-centered North Korean policy and Pyongyang's advocacy of the hostile two-state doctrine. And the Lee government underscores the urgent need to mitigate the Korea risk to revitalize its economy and enhance socio-economic stability. And to this end, it want to restore communication channels like military hotlines, and it also want to pursue reciprocal cessation or the suspension of provocative actions like halting using loudspeakers across the border. In addition, the Lee government want to pursue mutually beneficial inter-Korean dialogues, and it also want to make tangible efforts to improve the human rights situation in North Korea. And at the same time, it has affirmed that the continued development of Pyongyang's nuclear and missile capabilities must be addressed without delay, and it has emphasized that it will closely work together with the U.S. and will also make multilateral cooperation with the international community in order to achieve substantive progress in denuclearization and peace building on the Korean Peninsula. So I think that such an approach would contribute to enhancing the inter-Korean relations and restoring peace and stability on the Korean Peninsula.
Right, and you just mentioned the administration's efforts such as building communication channels, and President Lee Jae-myung has vowed to build peace on the Korean Peninsula, as you mentioned. What would you say is the most notable shift in South Korea's policy toward North Korea compared to the previous administration?
Yes, again, the previous government's hardline policy toward North Korea, just focusing on strengthening deterrence and Pyongyang's advocacy of the hostile two-state doctrine, made the inter-Korean relations the very worst and raised tensions on the Korean Peninsula as a whole. And the Lee Jae-myung government want to reduce tensions on the Korean Peninsula and resolve the Korea risk. And to this end, it want to stably manage the situation by promoting the restoration of interKorean communication channels like a military hotline and mutually suspending provocative actions. And in the early days in office, it is expected that the Lee government is focusing on reducing political and military tensions and resuming communications between the two Koreas, specifically restoring and improving the severely damaged interKorean relations will require considerable time and effort, and considering situation where the Lee government has numerous domestic and international agendas that it should prioritize, I think it is necessary to establish a foundation, just a foundation for restoring and enhancing interKorean relations in each early days in office. And I think that the Lee government's intention to normalize the interKorean relations should be spoken out loudly using various opportunities like what it did recently, the 25th anniversary of the June 15th joint declaration. And it is also necessary to reactivate communication channels to restore mutual trust, like the Panmunjom direct line and the interKorean joint liaison office. So I believe that normalizing interKorean relations will not only resolve the Korea risk, but also contribute to securing South Korea's positions and roles in resolving those Korean nuclear issues.
I see. And U.S. President Donald Trump said he'll get the conflict solved with North Korea. How likely do you think is it that Kim Jongun will engage in talks with Trump?
Well, at this point, it's not clear, but it is expected that North Korea-U.S. relations will get better through the resumption of the summit diplomacy between the two countries. As you know, the Trump government's first-term policy toward North Korea was the maximum pressure and engagement. And in the early days of the first term, it focused on the maximum pressure in response to North Korea's repeated nuclear and missile provocations. But as time passed, it shifted its policy priority to the maximum engagement. And after that, North Korea-U.S. leaders met 3 times in Singapore, Vietnam, and Panmunjom, and they discussed the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula and the normalization of North Korea-U.S. relations. And as you know, since the presidential campaign last year, President Trump has sent a love call to Chairman Kim, emphasizing their friendly relationships. But North Korea, which went through the failure of the 2019 Hanoi summit and has survived, mainly through cooperation with Russia, is very cautious about the responding to President Trump's love call. So personally, I expect that the talks between North Korea and U.S. will be back as the two wars in the Middle East and Europe come to an end. And based on its advanced nuclear capabilities, North Korea is likely to demand more from U.S. to resume the dialogue, and therefore North Korea-U.S. talks can be resumed when President Trump shows a more proactive stance and accepts what North Korea wants.
I see. And the Unification Minister nominee voiced the need to change the ministry's name to better reflect the government's efforts to promote peace. Do you see this as an effective measure?
Yes, I think so. As you mentioned, recently Unification Minister nominee Jung Dong-young said that it may need to change the official name of the Unification Ministry as a way of highlighting the government's, Lee Jae-myung government's efforts to promote the peace and stability within North Korea. Specifically, Jung mentioned the possibility of dropping unification out of the official name of the ministry, considering the situation where North Korean leader Kim Jongun declared that Pyongyang would not pursue unification and reconciliation with South Korea, and therefore Seoul first needed to focus on restoring peace on the Korean Peninsula. And he also said that suspending provocative actions like sending anti-Pyongyang leaflets to the north and restoring the interKorean communication channels would be the top policy priority to reduce tensions between the two Koreas. In addition, he mentioned that he supports the resumption of summit diplomacy between U.S. President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jongun, and it will greatly help reduce tensions on the Korean Peninsula. So overall, I think that the Lee government's efforts to reduce tensions on the Korean Peninsula, including possibly changing the official name of the Unification Ministry, will contribute to enhance the inter-Korean relations and mitigate the Korean risk in order to revitalize its economy and enhance socio-economic stability.
Right, we'll have to see if North Korea's Kim Jong-un really returns to the dialogue. Thank you so much for your insight today, Professor Min. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
It's rainy season, but with heavy monsoon rain taking a break, sweltering heat is on the rise. Seoul has experienced its first tropical night of the season, while the first heat wave advisory was also issued. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
Seoul saw the season's first heat wave advisory being issued on Monday, just a day after it experienced its first tropical night of the summer. A heat advisory is issued when the day's highest perceived temperature is expected to stay at 33 degrees Celsius or above for 2 or more days. However, the capital's heat wave advisory came 11 days later than last year. Still, the sweltering heat is expected to remain not just in Seoul, but nationwide.
As the hot and humid North Pacific high-pressure area covers our country, a large amount of hot and humid water vapor is flowing in along its edge.
The Korea Meteorological Administration also issued heat wave warnings for around 20 regions nationwide, including Daegu, Gwangju, Central Busan, and Eastern Jeju Island. A heat wave warning is issued when the highest perceived temperature is expected to reach 35 degrees or higher for 2 or more straight days, or when major damage is expected from the heat. Southern regions like Ulchin, Gyeongsangbuk-do Province, Haenam, Jeollanam-do Province, and Jeju Island experienced the hottest June since the KMA began compiling records. The intense heat also led to the death of a woman in her 60s who had been working in a field in Jinju, Gyeongsangnam-do Province. She was found unresponsive on Sunday afternoon, with police saying they believe she died of heat stroke. The KMA advises vulnerable groups, including the elderly and children, to take extra care to stay hydrated and limit outdoor activities. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
And President Lee Jae-myung has invited leading cultural figures to his office to hear their voices on ways to support them and promote Korea as a global cultural powerhouse. There, he called for the need to significantly expand support for artists. Our top office correspondent Yoon Jung-min reports.
A power that is soft but strong. The message was prominent as President Lee Jae-myung hosted leading figures in the cultural sector at the presidential office on Monday, given the impact of culture on the economy and beyond borders.
폭삭 속았수다를 보면서 이거를 하나의 산업으로 키워서 대한민국이 전 세계에 이렇게 딱 드러날 수 있는 결정적인 계기가 될 수도 있겠다 이 생각이 그때 들었습니다. 전 세계로 좀 진출해서 대한민국의 문화적 영향력을 키우면 우리가 세계적인 강국으로 선도국가.
For that, he urged the need to significantly increase investment and support for the culture industry. Along with First Lady Kim Hae-kyung, among those invited were musical writer Park Chun-hyu, who wrote a Tony Award-winning Maybe Happy Ending, renowned soprano Cho Soo-mi, and 16-year-old ballerino Park Yun-jae. Also present were Kim Won-seok, director of the Netflix hit drama When Life Gives You Tangerines, and Heo Ga-young, who recently won first prize in the La Cinef section at the Cannes for her short film First Summer.
As for the performance industry, we need more exchanges with local experts overseas. I ask for policies to help invite overseas experts here for cooperation, for artists here going abroad.
The roundtable focused on hearing from artists themselves as the president often emphasizes the need to listen to voices on the ground to devise tailored policies from their point of view, though he did pitch his suggestion based on his administrative experience as a governor.
사실 우리 사회 전체 수준을 높이기 위한 일종의 투자다 이렇게 생각을 좀 해줘야 될 것 같아서 제가 이제 문화 예술인 기본소득 같은 걸 도입하자.
This is in line with Lee's pledges in his inaugural speech when he vowed to make Korea one of the top 5 cultural powerhouses in the world, as he quoted a famous phrase by independence activist Kim Jongun, who wished for the power of a high culture.
The meeting took place amid growing recognition of Korean culture on the global stage. What lies ahead is how to materialize what's been discussed to actually support artists. Yoon, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Choi Ji-hee, and this is The World Now. Israeli airstrikes have hit several locations across Gaza on Monday, killing at least 60, while the Israeli Prime Minister is set to visit the White House. A seaside cafe was struck by one of the airstrikes, killing over 30 people. This coincided with Israel's Strategic Affairs Minister Ron Dermer's visit to Washington under U.S. pressure for a ceasefire and hostage exchange. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is also set to visit the White House on July 7th for talks with U.S. President Donald Trump. The Israeli military stated its targets included Hamas command centers and that evacuation orders were issued in some areas. However, humanitarian groups and UN officials warned that the intensified strikes are adding to civilian suffering. Western Turkey is battling massive wildfires driven by extreme heat and strong winds, forcing tens of thousands of people to evacuate from 5 regions across the country. Wildfires in Izmir province are entering their 3rd day, fueled by scorching temperatures and winds reaching 40 to 50 kilometers per hour. The province's airport was briefly closed, and over 50,000 residents from 41 settlements have been evacuated. More than 1,000 personnel are involved in firefighting efforts. However, dense smoke and strong winds are hampering aerial extinguishing efforts. Turkey's forestry minister warned that the situation may worsen without a drop in temperature and wind speeds. Emergency services remain on alert, with resources being shifted to vulnerable coastal areas. The blazes form a part of a wider Western Europe heat wave, with temperatures across the region running 5 to 10 degrees Celsius above seasonal norms. Denmark's parliament has approved extending its compulsory conscription to women starting July 1st, placing them on equal footing with men in the national draft lottery. Until now, only male citizens were subject to mandatory service, whereas women could join voluntarily. The reform brings forward plans originally set for 2027 due to security concerns amid Russian aggression and NATO defense commitments. Under the new policy, all women turning 18 after June 30th will enter the draft pool of the lottery system alongside men. Denmark plans to increase its annual number of conscripts from 4,700 to 6,500 by 2033. Service duration is also being extended from 4 to 11 months.
It looks like another sweltering day. The first heat wave advisory of the year was issued for Seoul yesterday, and the number of heat wave warning areas also increased. Most parts are the tropic at night, and the scorching heat will continue today. And this afternoon, Seoul gets up to 30 degrees under cloudy skies. Daegu, Gwangju both heating up to 35 degrees Celsius, with sunnier skies in the forecast with higher UV rays. But muggy air will make it feel more uncomfortable. And as temperatures climb significantly, the atmosphere will become unstable, leading to sudden downpours in various parts of the country. Expect up to 50 millimeters of scattered showers between this morning and the evening, along with thunderstorms. Looking ahead, more hot weather and tropical nights will continue. I mean, it's only the first day of July, so we need to brace for intense heat for at least 2 months. Stay hydrated and take care of your health.
Now that's all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at 5 p.m. Korea time. Thanks for watching.